Hi and welcome to this quick shop project. I have the same problem many people have, which is my surface plate ends up being another flat surface in the shop, and inevitably stuff gets stored on it. Now it's normally covered with a towel, a very thick towel, to protect it from damage and dust, but I've taken it off so that I can show this project. So right now all I have on it is my height gauge and the Toyo electronic indicator, but they're sitting on the surface and they're taking up a lot of space, and I want to get them off the surface. So I thought, hey, I'll put the Toyo up on a little shelf that sort of sits back a little ways, and I can get it off the surface plate so things could go under it if need be. I just hate using this as a flat surface, which it's become. So I came up with some parts to build one, but let me tell you about some of the problems I had. My biggest problem is the stand of the surface plate. It looks fairly nondescript. It's angle iron, 1/4 inch thick, like 1.5 inches on the side, and it looks like no big deal. But you see down here where I added the shelf over here, when I had to drill holes through the aluminum to mount the shelf, it was like an act of God. It absolutely was darn near impossible with high-speed drill bits. I dulled like 3 or 4 bits, quit cutting after just seconds each time. So I had to ultimately switch to carbide drill bits. Those worked, but using a carbide drill bit and a hand drill is really tough because they're so fragile. If you move at all, they break, and they're kind of expensive. Ultimately, that's what I ended up having to do because they were just so difficult to drill. But I really wanted the shelf at the time. So I thought if I was going to build a shelf for the Toyo up there, I would just mount it on the angle plate back here, put a couple screw holes in here and some verticals, and that would all go great. But that's just not happening. I'm not even going to try and drill it again. It was so difficult. I think that when they made this stand, it was out of a heat treatable steel with carbon in it, and they heat treated it and made it much stronger and harder, which is awesome because this thing is really sturdy, but that doesn't help when you're trying to mount anything to it. I guess you're not supposed to. So I had to come up with another solution. All around the edges, the angle plate is sort of set like this. This is just aluminum. It's a piece I had. So the angle plate is turned with this in towards this plate. So what it does, it makes a sort of nice shelf to support some weight. So I thought, hey, what I could do is I could take some angle plate, put it over it, and somehow clamp it to the angle plate. That's where I discovered my first problem, is that they radius the inside corner to make it stronger for angle plate. But you don't really want that because then it won't fit flush like this piece does. So I machined off all the inside radius on there with a milling cutter and made it square. Now that makes it a bit weaker. That's why they put the radius, because sharp corners are weak. They're stress riser points. So you don't always want them, but this is not going to be that kind of problem. So my design idea is you have an angle plate that fits over it, so most of the weight going straight down will just be supported without any screws or anything. And then I make a couple clamps that fit underneath, like this guy, that clamp on the angle plate itself from the bottom, but I leave them thick enough that there's only a little bit of gap so they're not canted at some funny angle. So let's just assemble what I've got here. I've done all the machining off camera to make this video quick so you can just see some ideas. So this is going to be the shelf. It would have been nice to put a little lip around this shelf, but I haven't done that, maybe in the future. And if this shelf ends up working out pretty well, I might make a second one for the other side. I thought maybe I should do one across the whole back, but that would lose a lot of surface plate area. So maybe one on the other side to hold the height gauge would be a good idea too. So just line up 4 of these guys. I think 4 was overkill, but I was only threading into aluminum and 1/4 inch. I sort of centered the weight on this guy so that there really won't be a lot of stress on the screws, hopefully. I cut out the plate in my table saw. I bought an aluminum cutting table saw blade, and that seemed to work pretty well. This is only 1/4 inch plate, and the aluminum cutting saw blade is good for something approaching a 1/4 inch. So next up are the uprights. And so that it didn't look funny, I didn't make it go all the way to the top, and I inset them from the side. Now these screws could be long and it wouldn't be a problem. The ones on the bottom, however, would go into the angle plate, and I don't want those to be off. This was just a prototype as well. If I like this idea, I might round some corners and flesh out. This is the first time it's been assembled, so I might discover some problems. This was all scrap material I had around the shop. And now the bottom gets, oh, I almost got that backwards. The bottom goes this way. This is the bottom, and these screws can't be long, because if they did, they would go all the way through and push into the angle plate, which I didn't want, although that might be less of a problem than I was thinking at the time. All these measurements I made to make this were sort of off the cuff. I made them and wrote them on the parts as I was making them. I didn't actually even do a drawing first, which is very unlike me. All right, so as you can see, this guy sits on top of the other angle plate. The bottom one has the corner removed from it so it'll lie flush, and then these guys go underneath this and clamp. So I'm going to go and put this back here, and I'll bring you right back. All right, so here it is in place with the Michutoyo electronic indicator and the stand for it right next to it, the comparator stand. So that got me a little bit of space, although that is sort of shallow here, but I just didn't want it on the surface plate because I want the towel covering everything. That's how I normally leave it, and having this on there was preventing that. I just don't want anything on the surface plate. The mount, turns out my clamps are really overkill, because the clamps actually are really beefy, but almost all the weight goes straight down. The clamps just prevent this from rocking out to the side, and there's not much force there to do that. So the thing is, actually the weak link is these vertical uprights here. I could have used thicker material for those. But I think this was a successful project. We'll see how I like it. And I might change it up, but that was just an idea. The interesting thing I thought about this that I wanted to share mostly was sort of the interesting approach to clamping on the angle iron that this thing's made out of. Anyways, I hope you find it useful, and hope I didn't waste your time. Thanks for watching.